My background is as a real estate developer and used to run the country's largest real estate consulting firm. So I come from the private side. So I'm what you would refer to as a rapacious developer, and looking at this issue, it's quite appropriate that I followed Bob and Ed. Bob from Kansas City, where I've done a lot of work with him, with the local PBS station, but then Ed, of course, living in Santa Fe, where I used to live for 18 years, until I moved here. And I moved here to DC for two reasons. One was climate change, that this issue was just so despicable that we in this country on our watch were destroying this, millions of years of evolution and progress, and here we are wiping it out in a few generations, and obviously on our watch. But the second reason I moved here to DC is that all my research over the years had demonstrated that metropolitan DC is the model by which we're building the built environment. And that may sound strange, but all the research kept on pointing it out, and I wanted to be in the middle of the model to understand how it was playing out on the ground. And what I want to talk about this morning is much of today is focused on the supply efficiency side of how we address climate change. This is on the demand mitigation side. There's two sides to this. Now, you may not believe it, but 2-3 years ago, it was actually legal to talk about climate change in this town. That you weren't vilified if you brought this up. But when that discussion was taking place in this town, 99% of the discussion was on supply efficiency, a critical set of issues, but almost nothing was on demand mitigation and how we build the built environment, particularly at the community and place level, matters. So I'd like to welcome you to the future, which, if you're a Republican, you're going to run screaming from here, is metropolitan Washington, D.C., and talk about how we can address climate change through walkable urban development. First off, the built environment. We've heard about what the built environment is as far as its contribution to climate change. I'm going to talk about that in just one second, but also as far as its economic impact. The built environment, which is our real estate, and the infrastructure that supports the real estate, is 35% of the asset base of the country. It's the largest asset class in the entire economy. And we in real estate are very proud of this fact. And we know this every time that we have a recession, because we have created, of the last 3 recessions, we are responsible for 2 of them. And I think you'll agree that this last time we really did it up right. And the reason that this economy is bumping along at 2% is because the built environment has not been re-engaged in this economy. And one of the major reasons why it's not re-engaged is because we don't understand that there's been a structural change in how we are building the built environment. And we in real estate are trying our damnedest to catch up to understand what the market wants and how to give the market what it wants. As you undoubtedly know, that prior to the Second World War, most real estate developers in most of our cities were built based upon a walkable urban place. Higher density, mixed use, most things were within walking distance, or there was a transit connection. What Bob talked about with that high school and junior high school out in Kansas City was built as a walkable urban place where the vast majority of the students walked there from high density housing surrounding it. Well, during the bulk of the late 20th century, we pushed the pendulum all the way over to where we were only building drivable suburban, which is the other alternative by which we can build the built environment. There are only 2 options: walkable urban or drivable suburban. Drivable suburban is at a much lower density. It's a segregated land uses, and the only way to get between those land uses is, of course, by car and truck. So in the second half of the 20th century, we all know how we laid it out on the ground. We started with the freeways, and this is the Schuylkill Expressway outside of Philadelphia where I grew up. And then we added of course, the regional mall and the shopping infrastructure, which then we added the office park and the business park, so we got all of our jobs out there. And then we only got better at building freeways, and we all know how that laid out on the ground, whereby for every 1% population growth in the late 20th century, we were expanding the landmass of our metropolitan areas between 6 and 8%. It was geometric growth, otherwise known as sprawl. But now, we have no shortage of land in this country. Having lived out in Santa Fe, you know, I saw that right on the ground. You know, we have so much land we got this land fair and square. We stole it fair and square. And what we've done is that we've used it, thrown it away, and moved on further out. Hence the 1% versus 6 to 8% land use consumption. The built environment is also responsible for the vast majority of greenhouse gas emissions. By my count, it's roughly 40% in buildings. Ed had a higher number, and 30% with our transportation system. But it obviously is the #1 contributor to climate change. But as I say, place matters. Here's something that Scott Bernstein of the Center for Neighborhood Technology put together, looking at the Chicago metropolitan area. So here is Lake Michigan. Here's downtown Chicago. This heat map shows the CO2 per household per year in tons. And the blue is 2.5 tons of CO2 per household per year. The red is 11.5 tons and above. I think you can see a pattern here. The drivable suburban fringe of our metropolitan area is where the vast majority of the built environment's CO2 emissions and other greenhouse gases happen to come from. Now, a funny thing happened in the mid-90s. Just as we in real estate got really good at building drivable suburban formulas, it's what I refer to as the 19 standard product types, these formulas that we in real estate perfected in the late 20th century, which is why the country looks the same no matter where you are. But in the mid-90s, that pendulum, we were building only drivable suburban, began to move backward. The market was demanding something different. So as a result, we've got this matrix here of 4 different options by which we can build any metropolitan area, and you can put the land use in. It's either, as I mentioned, drivable suburban or walkable urban. Those are the 2 options as far as land use form. And the economic role of the place is either regionally significant, which is where jobs concentrate, it's where civic functions, it's where entertainment, eds and meds, it's where the economy makes its living, or it's local serving, bedroom communities, where most of us live. So this simple 4-cell matrix basically defines 100% of the land use in our metropolitan region. The walkable urban part of it is at best 10%. And the regionally significant walkable urban places are somewhere between 1 and 2% of our land uses. And my focus for the rest of this presentation, as well as my research, has been in this upper left-hand corner. The regionally significant walkable urban places, which is going to be where much of the real estate demand is going to be over the next generation, if only we can figure out how to do it. And much of it is going to be the former edge cities, the regionally significant drivable suburban places that are going to become walkable urban over the next generation. So the shorthand for regionally significant walkable urban places, the first shorthand we got was walkable urban place. Whoops, we decided that didn't work. So somebody more creative than I came up with walk-ups as the shorthand for it. So it's important to note that the research has shown there's 6 different types of walk-ups. First, of course, is the traditional downtown. Here's downtown DC. Second are the downtown adjacent places. These are places that surround the downtown. Generally, they have a lower density, but they have much different character than downtown. Then there's urban commercial. These are what were formerly local serving commercial districts in the early 20th century, late 19th century. They all went downhill. Many of them are now coming back as regionally significant walk-ups. Now, those were in the urban, in the center city. There's another 3 taking place in the suburbs. So what this trend is not just the redevelopment of our center cities, it's the transformation and the urbanization of the suburbs. One is, of course, suburban town centers. These are 18th, 19th century towns that were absorbed by the sprawl. They went downhill in the late 20th century. They're now coming back as regionally significant walk-ups. The other one, and this is going to be, there's a question about regional malls. This is going to be probably the biggest mover of the next generation. These are strip commercial redevelopment. This is where the regional malls are going to get fundamentally redeveloped. And then finally, there'll be a few greenfield sites. These are where you just take a greenfield, add water, and poof, you have instant urbanity. We're not going to see many of these because these are extremely costly. There's one that was developed here in this town called National Harbor, that the first phase, 95% privately funded. First phase was $3.5 billion by one developer. And that developer, Milt Peterson, said nobody is crazy enough to do this again. He would never do it again. Now, this is metropolitan Washington, which about 20 years, and so here is the district, here's the river, Arlington County, the country's smallest county. And that 20 years ago, there were about 8, 9 walk-ups in this region. Today, the research shows that there's 43 regionally significant walk-ups. And here are where they are as far as the 6 different types. Here's downtown. We're in downtown. It's both what's considered the downtown and what also is referred to as the Golden Triangle. But this is the downtown. And oh, by the way, this is about 1/60th of the landmass of the District of Columbia and generates a net surplus as far as fiscal impact on the District of Columbia government of $500 million, which is basically the cost of funding the public schools. 20 years ago, the downtown had a slogan, or would have had a slogan if somebody bothered to put it together, of dull, dangerous, and boring, or actually dirty. And it was a place that you would not be caught dead in. Then again, you might have been. Today, the downtown is built out. There were 90 surface parking lots 20 years ago. Today, there are 0. It's done. Then there's the downtown adjacent places. And these downtown adjacent places have all been coming back over the last 15, 20 years. In 15 to 20 years into the future, because of the height limit here in this town, these places are done. Then there's the urban commercial. Again, these are places that used to have local serving retail. They're now coming back, generally speaking, as urban entertainment zones and places for high-end boutiques and high-density urban living. Then going out into the suburbs, we have the suburban town centers, such as Bethesda and Silver Spring, that are coming back as walkable urban places in a very healthy manner. And finally, and then the fifth, a very important one, strip commercial redevelopment. These are the former strip malls that have become obsolete, that are now repurposed and redeveloping as high-density walkable urban places. And then finally, 4 different greenfield projects. 43 places, when 20 years ago there were at most 10. Now, the other thing to note is that metropolitan areas in this country, all metropolitan areas, grow in basically one direction, what's referred to as the favored quarter. The favored 90-degree arc coming out of downtown. Kansas City grows to the south, Denver grows to the south, Atlanta grows to the north, Phoenix grows to the northeast, while Washington, of course, grows to the northwest. And most of the initial walkable urban development took place in the favored quarter, just like we've been sprawling for 50 years. Most of it took place along the red line and along the orange line, going out into the favored quarter. An interesting thing taking place, though, just recently, over the last 10 years, is we've begun to see the expansion of the favored quarter. We've begun to see development taking place further out into the northeast and into the southeast. This town has been divided racially. Race is a major factor in how we've been building our metropolitan areas throughout the country. The favored quarter goes to where white upper middle income housing concentrates. On the other side of town from where the local minority concentrates. That's how this town worked. White upper middle income, low income, black. And we're now beginning to see the expansion of the favored quarter because these metro lines are reaching capacity. So some of the research that's come in, when you take a look at the District of Columbia versus the suburbs as far as how much development, that 42%, surprisingly, only 42% of these regionally significant places are in the District of Columbia, representing 49% of the total square footage. In the suburbs, it's 58% of the places and 51% of the square footage. As I say, this is not just the transformation of our center cities. This is the transformation of our suburbs into walkable urban places. There's 4.1 billion square feet of real estate in this region. There's a big caveat here. We don't have what's known as owner-user real estate. We don't have the federal government's or George Washington University's real estate in here, or Marriott's corporate headquarters, because there is no data set for that. We're hoping to fill that in later. But right now, this is everything except owner-user space in the region, including single-family housing. Walk-ups right now are only 11.6%. Now, these are regionally significant places. We don't have data yet on the local serving walk-ups. That's coming next. So this number will probably double when we put in the local serving walk-ups. So this is only regionally significant. Of the 4.1 billion square feet, a third of it is in income-producing property. 2/3 are in our for-sale housing. Of the income property, 29% is in walk-ups, which is a reasonably healthy market share as far as the total market. But it varies based upon different types of product. With the industrial product, very little is in walk-ups. That makes sense. Most industrial is one level, and you need truck access. It doesn't make sense to be in a walkable urban place. But then it begins to ramp up with a rental, residential, industrial. But where it really begins to move is with hotels, where over half of the hotels are in walkable urban places. Office, where 55% is in walkable urban places. And sports and convention. So we're beginning to see different market segments, different product types move in different manners. But the important thing is that there's a trend line towards more and more walkable urban development. This is the real estate cycle back in the 1990s. 24% of 4 different income properties, which are office, retail, apartment, and then hotel, were built in the walkable urban places in this region. In the 2000s real estate cycle, it was 33%. And in the cycle that started in 2009, 49% of all development is going into walkable urban places. The market is telling us they want more and more of this stuff in walkable urban places. The driver has been the office sector, where 38% was built in the 1990s, 49% in the 2000s cycle, and 59% in this current cycle. And then it's followed up by the rental apartments. As we know, rental apartments has been driving us out of this real estate depression that we've been in the 1990s. And again, this is only regionally significant places. This does not count the bedroom communities where a lot of these rental apartments go. We don't have that data yet. So the 1990s, 12% went into regionally significant walk-ups, 19% in the 2000s, and 42% in this cycle. And again, If you were to add the local serving places, Cleveland Parks, Mount Vernon Triangle up on the New York Avenue, Shirlington, if you would add those in, this number would probably double. Probably 80% of all rental apartments in this region over the last 3-year cycle have been built in walkable urban places. The most iconic new development product in this market right now is a 200 to 300 unit mid-rise rental apartment with a grocery store on the ground floor. That is the dominant thing that's being built right now in this market. Now, how do we know that the market wants it? There's all sorts of surveys that I could tell you about, but the real thing that drives this, of course, is the price premium the market's willing to pay for walkable urban places. 20 years ago, the hot market was, of course, the drivable suburban business park in this town and throughout the country. And the drivable suburban business park probably had a 50 to 100% price premium over downtown office space. But today it's entirely different. That walkable urban office space, on average, rents for almost $37 per square foot per year, as compared to drivable suburban, which is about $21 per square foot. That's a 75% price premium. The lines have crossed over the last 20 years, so that now the walkable urban places are by far the most expensive. And the other thing is that the walkable urban places are now generating over 2/3 of all the rent being paid for office space. And when you also consider, for those of you that understand the financing of this, that cap rates for walkable urban places are much lower, which means their valuation is higher, we're probably looking at 80% of all the value in office in this market is in walkable urban places right now. Now, how about for sale residential? Somebody brought up earlier about how about retrofitting the residential market, and this is the big challenge, because in this market right now, only 3% of housing is in regionally significant walkable urban places. Now, again, I'm not putting in local serving places, bedroom communities that are walkable urban, like where Bob is developing out in Kansas City. We don't have that data yet. I'm going to guess it'll probably be about a third. But right now, it's only 3% are in these regionally significant walkable urban places. But we are seeing tremendous price premiums in those places as well. That walkable urban residential, on average, sells for $380 a square foot. And drivable suburban places are averaging $220 a square foot. That's a 71% price premium. And again, we've seen throughout the country that these lines have crossed. I did a piece for the New York Times. I write an op-ed for them every few months. And the last one looked at Columbus, Denver, Seattle, Atlanta, showing these lines crossing, places that 20 years ago were basically slums, as compared to the high-end suburban golf course community. And 20 years ago, the golf course community was far more expensive on a price per square foot basis than the urban walkable place. Today, it's just the opposite. The lines have crossed throughout the country. Now, why is DC a model, and why is it coming to be a place near you? This is a theory. I can't, since this is a projection, I can't say that this is in any way a fact. But based upon the creative class work of Richard Florida and a variety of other folks, that were in the knowledge economy. The knowledge economy, one of the great precursors of a knowledge economy, is what percentage of the workforce has their college degree, as one indicator. And what you see here, we have a tale of 3 kinds of places in our country. The nation as a whole, right now, about 28% of those over 25 have their college education. In the 5 most walkable metro areas in the country, taking DC out for 1 second, we have upwards of 38% of all of the workforce is college educated. In DC right now, it's 47%. DC is the most educated metropolitan area in the country. There's a connection between the knowledge economy, the creative class, and the demand for walkable urban places. Not that everybody who has a college degree is saying, I must live in a walkable urban place, but they want the option of living, working, and/or playing in a walkable urban place. Hence, why DC has gotten here first is because it's the most educated metro area in the country, but the rest of the country is obviously following. If you move these trend lines forward, the rest of the country is on the trajectory to follow the top 5 metros. This is Seattle, Portland, Denver, Boston. And of course, if you move that forward over the next 40 years, it's following this trajectory is what we're probably going to see as far as the increased education demanded by the knowledge economy, then demanding walkable urban places. So DC just happened to get there first. What does it mean for the bottom line? I've come up with, I've blatantly stolen from LEED and U.S. Green Building Council a platinum, gold, silver, and copper ranking of these walkable urban places on 2 metrics. I'm just going to show you one. One metric is on the economic performance. The other metric is on social equity. You know, can ordinary people live or gain access to these places? But I just want to show you the economics. And of course, what we're finding is that walkability is driving this. So walk score is a major determinant of the economic performance of these places. The other 2 determinants that are important are the college educated, or the level of college education in these places, and the job density of these places. It explains 90% of this performance level. So again, we have 4 different levels. The copper, the walk score is between 70 and 77. Silver, 78 to 85. The gold, from 86 to 92. And the platinum, the walk score is between 93 and 100. With every step up of these 43 places, their walk score on average goes up by 6 points. Their office rents go up over $7 per square foot per year. Their retail rents go up about the same, about $7 per square foot per year. Rental apartments go up about $6 per year with every step up in, as far as economic performance. And the for sale housing prices go up $113 for every step up. This is all the market saying we want more of this stuff. We want to build more of this stuff. Now, what does it mean for your metropolitan region? And these are back of the envelope numbers, but in this region, for every 1 walk-up, you need 130,000 people to support it, which translates into that you should have 7 to 8 of these regionally significant places, downtown being just one of them, per million people. So Kansas City is about 2 million people. There should be about 15 regionally significant walk-ups in Kansas City. And right now they have about 5. The big question is, where will the other 10 go? Now, what does it mean as far as the bottom line? What's it going to do as far as the impact on climate change? Well, work done by Steve Winkelman, by Scott Bernstein, by Peter Calthorpe has laid out the fact that the typical drivable suburban household is consuming 640,000 BTUs per year. As you move that household into a walkable urban configuration, into a leaky, old, walkable urban configuration, just by that, you're going to decrease their energy consumption, hence their contribution to climate change, by 50%. And if you move them into a walkable urban green location, similar to what we're talking about today, you're going to reduce their impact on the climate by 75%. Given that we in the built environment are contributing, again, 73, 75, 80% to climate change just by moving somebody from the drivable suburban fringe out in that red zone in Chicago to a walkable urban green location. We're going to reduce their impact by 75%. And how's that happen? The best way that I can think of it is, if you remember the classic movie Karate Kid, Mr. Miyagi he is asked the question by Daniel's son about how can he avoid getting beat up by his high school classmates. And Mr. Miyagi said, best defense, no be there. And the way that we're going to avoid climate change is by living in places which the market wants, if only we can figure out how to deliver that product, so that we are not in a position where we have to use our car to go get a quart of milk or use our car to drive to the bathroom. So today and in the future, walkable urban development is the market, and it's going to be the way we're going to address climate change. Thank you.